Hello, and welcome to this Kickstarter preview of Steel Colosseum from Games and published by Zatu Games. My name's Tom, and I've been lucky enough to get an early prototype of the game to play around with ahead of the launch on Kickstarter. I've been playing around with it for a few weeks now, so I think I'm in a pretty good place to tell you what I think about the game and how it plays. So, welcome to the Steel Colosseum. Let's get the basics out of the way first. What is Steel Colosseum? How do you play? And most importantly, how do you win? So, Steel Colosseum is an arena combat game for up to 4 players that, once you're familiar with how things work, takes about an hour to play. You've got 2 teams of robots that will be looking to dart around in a combat arena, dealing damage, dodging attacks until one robot has been deactivated. Once you've managed to deactivate a robot, your team scores a point, and that's the end of the bout. You'll then get a chance to repair, rearm, and then you're back out there causing mayhem. First team to 2 points wins. Nice and simple. Each team has 2 robots, and you can either play with one player controlling both robots, or you can be joined by another player, and then you can take a robot each. There are 6 robots in the box, and they each have a unique deck of control cards filled with unique attacks and abilities. Because of this, they all feel quite different to play, and without going into the details too much now, some of the robots feel nippy and quick with fast attacks, and others definitely feel like they slowly lumber and lurch around the arena and then hit like a truck. Each of these robots can then be customised by adding new upgrade systems. You get a chance to kit them out at the beginning of the game, and then you can add in new upgrades between the bouts, if you can afford them. These upgrade cards might give you new weapons to attack with, new abilities to give you the edge, or new upgrades to mobility to allow you to escape danger and then flip the tables on your opponent. There are also powerful trick cards that you can buy, and they'll give you some really useful abilities. These cards are single use, and you have to pay extra to have them, but they can really swing things in your favour if they've been used well. They can let you sneak in an extra hit or maybe a bit of extra movement. It's all situational, but you definitely shouldn't overlook them. And that's a pretty good overview of what Steel Colosseum is all about. So let's take a look at the setup and how it looks on the table. Now, I should say that this here is a prototype copy of Steel Colosseum, so some of the art or components could change a little bit by the time it works its way to the final retail version. But with that said, let's take a look. So here we have the basic initial setup for a game of Steel Colosseum. You've got the board over here with the serious damage and trick card decks set off to the side. Over here is one team's side of the board, and over here is the other team's play area. Here are your victory emblem tokens, and every time you win a bout, you flip one of these, lit side up. The first thing that you're going to need to do is to choose your operator. These are the characters controlling the robots who fight in the arena. They each have different special abilities, as well as a little flavour text to bring you into the world of Steel Colosseum. Once everybody has their operators, the last to pick gets to choose the layout for the arena. This will dictate where the obstacles and activation tokens for the upgrade systems are placed. There are 8 different arenas in the back of the rulebook that you can use for your battles. Once you have your arena all set up, you can begin setting up your team. You'll do this over at the parts market. This will be where you can buy all your starter upgrades as well as your robots you'll be using for your fight. Each team gets 8 scrap to spend as they see fit. The robots are free, which is an incredibly good offer if you think about it, whereas the upgrade systems will all cost a little bit of scrap. You'll go back and forth as teams selecting either an upgrade or a robot until both teams have passed. You have to select 2 robots, but you can buy as many or as few upgrades as you like. You can be a bit tactical here if you're smart about it, because if one of your favourite upgrades is out in the parts market, you can prioritise picking that up to make sure it ends up in your team's garage. But if you take a bit too much time picking out upgrades, you may find the robots you want have already been selected, and you may be left with some suboptimal choice for your playstyle. When you choose your robot, you also take their deck of control cards and put them in front of you ready to go. Once both teams have chosen 2 robots each and passed on buying upgrades, it's time for the bout to start proper. Each team chooses which upgrades to attach to their robots and lays them face down in their deactivated state. You then place your bots out on the arena floor, build up your decks of control cards, and get ready to rumble. Each round of the bout will have players choosing a card from their hand for each robot they control and placing them face down in front of them. And then once every bot has a card, they're all flipped over and resolved in speed order, with higher numbers being faster. And this is where some of that flavour I was talking about earlier starts to come in. Some robots are just plain slower than others, so they're less likely to have fast action cards within their decks. There are ways to mitigate this though. In fact, one of my favourite upgrade combos was a card that allowed your robot to activate first no matter what the speed of all the other played cards were. This was a nice way to surprise my opponent, having my hulking robot all of a sudden leap into action and dish out some serious damage, even if it did end up deactivating my upgrade cards in the process. Anyway, I digress. These cards will have a mixture of a few different actions on them. They can either allow you to move, attack, activate your upgrade systems, or sometimes they're going to have something unique just for that card. You can carry out as many of these card actions as you like, and then when you're done, you get the option of buying a trick card from the store with any scrap that you may have on hand. After that, you draw a new control card for your robot, and then the next highest speed card gets resolved. These cards stay play down, so you don't get to pick them up until after you power down your robot. This means you're going to have your robot do nothing and be like a sitting duck for a turn just so you can pick up your cards to give yourself some more options. Now, it's tempting to try to not power down your robot at all, and that's definitely possible in a one-on-one game due to a few extra cards you get. But if you do that, you're going to end up with a handful of bad options and you'll likely end up taking a loss after being outmaneuvered. It's all about finding that opportune time to take a robot breather and also making sure that your teammate is close enough to wallop anybody who tries to take advantage of your little robo-nap. After a round or two, you'll have generally gotten yourself into a position where you can either hit or be hit by your opponent, and one of these is definitely better than the other. But when you attack, you can either use your onboard weapon, which is found on your robot card, or you can use any of your activated and equipped attack systems. I should probably say how you activate your upgrades. All over the board there are these activation points. If you manage to get one of your robots to move over the top of one of these, then you can activate an upgrade card on one of your robots on your team, flipping it over. If you manage to go over this one, then you can activate two systems, and this is the quickest way to activate things. You can also activate systems with one of your action cards, and one of the operators also allows you to do it for free once per bout. And as a rule, once an upgrade system is activated, it stays that way for the rest of the bout, but there are ways they can end up deactivated again. Anyways, you've activated some upgrades, you've manoeuvred yourself into position, and now it's time to start dishing out some damage to your opponent. And when you attack, you'll be attacking the side of your target closest to your attacking robot. Now, each of these robots starts with armour arranged all around them, and as you attack a side, that armour starts to get knocked off and scattered around the arena as scrap. Now, anybody can pick that scrap up and add it to their scrap pool to be used for buying trick cards, new upgrade systems, or whatever your robotic heart desires. Needless to say, scrap is important, and it definitely isn't junk. Once you've managed to knock all of the armour off of one side of a robot, any additional damage delivered there will have you drawing cards from the serious damage deck. For every damage you draw one card from the deck, reading the horrible ways you can mess with your opponent, chuckle a little bit to yourself, and then you choose one to give them. Most of these cards have a serious damage icon across the top, and if the total number of those icons dealt to a robot ever hits the damage limit that's printed on the robot card, then the robot is deactivated and the bout is over. Then it's a quick repair, rebuild and reset, and you're back out there for round 2. All of your serious damage goes back into the deck unless you were unlucky enough to get dealt some persistent damage. In that case, you're stuck with that for the rest of the game. Now you get a chance to pick out some new upgrade systems, if you can spare the scrap, or you could spend that scrap repairing some of the armour on your bots. Then you basically repeat the exact same belt structure again until somebody wins a second time, and then the game is done and dusted. As I said, I've been playing this for a fair bit recently. I've played with all the robots, and I think I've played with all the operators too. I've definitely got my favourites. Sentinel, the war drone, has got to be one of my favourites. There's a card in its deck which basically means you can absolutely bombard your opponent with a volley of 3 shots, but you can't move at all with that card. So getting into position and then maybe using your teammate to push one of the opposing side into the firing line is very, very satisfying to pull off. There are some fun ways to use these robots together too. You can set up a slow team of heavily armoured heavy hitters, or a high-speed manoeuvrable whirlwind that can jump over the obstacles in the arena, make a quick hit and then retreat back out of harm's way. Or a mixture of both. There are a few example teams in the back of the rulebook, and I'd probably recommend that for your first game. During my time with Steel Colosseum, one thing that took me a game or two to appreciate was just how good those trick cards are. At first they seemed highly situational and a waste of perfectly good scrap that I could use to repair my robots. And they are situational, but they're definitely not a waste. They give you that little bit of extra flexibility that can really help you turn the tables in your favour. They are single use, but they can really make all of the difference. The setting in the game is really interesting too. It's sort of Mad Max meets Robot Wars, and as someone who grew up watching a lot of Robot Wars, I definitely appreciate that. What I really like though is the art, and whereas a lot of post-apocalyptic games are all drab and brown, there's a lot of colour here. And all the graffiti and neon shades remind me of an old video game called Jet Set Radio Future, and it's a really cool and very refreshing take on a sandy wasteland. So those are my initial thoughts on Steel Colosseum. It's a solid robot battling game with some good hand management, lots of ways to customise your playstyle and plenty of combinations of operators and robots to experiment with. It's also surprisingly quick to play through. I quite enjoy an arena battle game and I've got a few in my collection, and this is probably one of the shorter ones to play. And that doesn't mean that it's shallow. There's a lot of tactical aspects to consider when you're playing this and making your moves. These are armoured robots, but they can have all those armour stripped away in a turn or two if you make a wrong move and leave yourself exposed. I've really enjoyed Steel Colosseum, and I hope I've managed to get across what I've enjoyed about it. So please check out the Kickstarter campaign page for more information, and thank you ever so much for watching.